March 27, 2026, 5:41 a.m., eastern bank of the Oscill River, northeast of Kupiansk. 43 Russian vehicles, 2 Pol-21 GPS jammers, 1 R-330ZH, Zytel electronic warfare complex, a full electronic umbrella covering 8 kilometers in every direction, and not a single system capable of stopping what was coming. Because what was coming didn't use radio, didn't use GPS, didn't emit a single electromagnetic signal. Within 4 minutes, 14 vehicles would be burning. A 40-meter pontoon bridge would collapse into the Oscill. And Russian electronic warfare doctrine, the doctrine Moscow spent billions perfecting, would be exposed as obsolete. This is the story of how fiber-optic drones turned Russia's most expensive jamming systems into expensive paperweights. I'm your host at Iron Bullet, where we analyze the battles that change wars. And this battle didn't just change the Kupiansk front. It changed the fundamental calculus of electronic warfare in the 21st century. Let's break it down. To understand what happened on the banks of the Oscill, you have to understand what was happening around Kupiansk in late March 2026. The Kupiansk sector had been one of the most active front lines since autumn 2025. Russian forces had been grinding forward in small increments east of the city, attempting to establish control over the Oscill River crossings that would allow them to push reinforcements toward positions on the western bank. The western bank was the prize. Whoever controlled it controlled the high ground overlooking Kupiansk's northern approaches and the critical supply routes running south toward Izium. By mid-March 2026, Russian positions on the western bank were deteriorating. Ukrainian counterattacks in the second week of March had pushed back several Russian footholds, and the units remaining across the river were running dangerously low on ammunition and fuel. Russian commanders faced a stark choice: reinforce the western bank or abandon it entirely. They chose to reinforce, and they believed they had the perfect tool to protect the crossing. The plan centered on electronic warfare dominance. Russian EW units moved 2 Pol-21 systems and 1 R-330ZH Zytel complex into positions along the eastern bank, creating what commanders described in intercepted communications as a dead zone for Ukrainian drones. The Pol-21 system works by jamming GPS signals across a wide area, denying navigation data to any drone relying on satellite positioning. The R-330ZH Zytel targets communication frequencies, disrupting the radio links between drone operators and their aircraft. Together, these systems had been effective against standard Ukrainian FPV drones throughout 2025. Operators would launch their drones, fly toward Russian positions, and suddenly lose control as jamming overwhelmed the video feed and command link. Russian EW operators had grown confident. In the weeks before the Oscill crossing, these same units had reportedly neutralized over 30 Ukrainian drones in the Kupiansk sector alone. Their after-action reports described near-total dominance of the electromagnetic spectrum within their coverage zone. Which weapon was deadlier at the Oscill crossing? A. HIMARS. B. Artillery. C. Fiber-optic drones. Comment below. That confidence shaped the entire operation. Russian engineers began assembling the pontoon bridge on March 25th, working in 2-hour shifts under the cover of darkness. The bridge was a standard PMP heavy floating bridge, capable of supporting vehicles up to 60 tons. Assembly required linking individual pontoon sections across the 40-meter width of the Oscill at this crossing point, anchoring them against the current, and reinforcing the approach ramps on both banks. By 4 a.m. on March 27th, the bridge was complete. Russian engineers reported it operational, and the first vehicles began moving toward the crossing point. The order of march was telling. 4 BTR-82A armored personnel carriers would cross first, establishing a security perimeter on the western bank. Behind them, 6 supply trucks carrying ammunition and fuel. The the lifeline for the struggling Western Bank units. Behind the trucks, 4 more BTR-82As and 2 command vehicles. 14 vehicles in total, plus the engineering elements on the eastern bank. They staged in a column along a tree-lined road approximately 400 meters from the river. Standard procedure would have been to disperse the vehicles and cross in small groups to minimize vulnerability. But Russian commanders, confident in their electronic shield, allowed the column to stack up. Intercepted radio traffic captured a battalion commander telling his subordinate, "The sky is clean. EW confirms no drone activity within 10 kilometers. Move the column forward and cross in full." Those words would become an epitaph. What the Russians didn't know was that Ukrainian intelligence had been watching the crossing preparations for 48 hours. Satellite imagery first detected the pontoon assembly on March 25th. Ukrainian military intelligence cross-referenced the imagery with signals intelligence. Intercepted radio communications between Russian engineering units and their higher command. The communications confirmed the timeline, the crossing point, and critically, the EW deployment. Ukrainian analysts recognized the opportunity immediately. A concentrated Russian crossing, protected by an EW umbrella, the Russians believed was impenetrable, represented the perfect test case for a weapon system that had been deployed in limited numbers since late 2025, but had never been used in a large-scale coordinated strike. Fiber-optic FPV drones. Stay with me. What happens in the next 4 minutes destroys an entire crossing operation and rewrites electronic warfare doctrine. The technology behind fiber-optic drones is deceptively simple. A standard FPV drone relies on radio signals to transmit video from its onboard camera back to the operator and to receive flight commands from the operator's controller. These radio signals are vulnerable to jamming, overwhelm the frequency with noise, and the link breaks. The drone loses its video feed, stops responding to commands, and either crashes or flies off course. A fiber-optic drone eliminates this vulnerability entirely. Instead of transmitting signals through the air, the drone unspools a thin fiber-optic cable behind it as it flies. Video feeds and control commands travel through this cable as light pulses, not radio waves. No electromagnetic emission. No signal for jammers to detect or disrupt. The drone is electronically invisible. The cable itself is thinner than a human hair. A gossamer thread that weighs almost nothing and creates negligible drag. Depending on the model, Ukrainian fiber-optic drones carry between 5 and 12 kilometers of cable on a lightweight spool. The operator sees exactly what the drone sees, in real time, with zero latency. And no amount of electronic warfare can interrupt that connection. For Russian EW operators staring at their screens that morning, fiber-optic drones didn't exist. Their systems detected no incoming signals, because there were no signals to detect. The Ukrainian drone unit responsible for the strike had been training with fiber-optic systems since January 2026. They operated from a concealed position approximately 3 kilometers northwest of the crossing point, hidden in a tree line with camouflage netting overhead. The unit consisted of 6 operators and 2 support personnel managing the cable spools and reloading drones. Their target package was precise. Primary target, the center section of the pontoon bridge. Secondary targets, the fuel trucks in the column. Tertiary targets, the BTR-82As. The attack sequence was designed to maximize chaos, collapse the bridge first, trapping vehicles mid-crossing, then hit the fuel trucks to create secondary explosions that would engulf the remaining column. At 5:38 a.m., as the first BTR-82A rolled onto the pontoon bridge and 2 more waited on the approach ramp, the Ukrainian unit commander gave the order. 6 drones launched simultaneously. They flew low, barely 15 meters above the treetops, trailing their invisible fiber-optic tethers behind them. The flight path took them over dense forest for the first 2 kilometers, keeping them below the tree canopy, where even visual observation was nearly impossible. As they cleared the forest and crossed the open ground toward the river, they climbed slightly to 30 meters, still too low for Russian radar to acquire, and completely invisible to the EW systems scanning the electromagnetic spectrum. Russian EW operators saw nothing. Their screens showed the same clean electromagnetic environment they had reported all morning. The Pol-21 systems continued broadcasting GPS jamming signals into empty sky. The R330ZH Zettel continued scanning radio frequencies for drone control links that didn't exist. At 5:41 a.m., the lead drone reached the pontoon bridge. The operator, watching through the drone's camera feed, transmitted flawlessly through 3 kilometers of fiber-optic cable, identified the center pontoon section. One BTR-82A was in the middle of the bridge. 2 more vehicles were on the approach ramp. The drone dove. Impact was direct. The warhead, a shaped charge designed to penetrate armor, struck the center pontoon section, punching through the steel deck and detonating inside the floating platform. The explosion severed the bridge at its midpoint. The pontoon sections buckled, twisted, and began separating. The BTR-82A on the bridge lurched sideways as the deck collapsed beneath it, sliding into the Oscill River as the bridge gave way. The 2 vehicles on the approach ramp slammed on their brakes. The lead BTR nearly toppled into the gap where the bridge section had been. Behind them, the column ground to a halt in sudden confusion. 3 seconds later, the second drone struck. Its target was the 3rd vehicle in the column, a fuel truck loaded with diesel for the Western Bank garrison. The drone hit the cab, and the shaped charge ignited the fuel tank. The explosion was massive. A fireball erupted 60 meters into the air, engulfing the vehicles on either side. The truck behind it, also carrying fuel, caught fire within seconds. 2 fuel trucks burning simultaneously created a wall of flame across the road. How many vehicles did Ukraine destroy at the Oscill crossing? A. 8. B. 14. C. 22. Answer at the end of this video. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th drones struck in rapid succession. Their targets were the BTR-82, as trapped in the column, vehicles that couldn't move forward because the bridge was gone and couldn't reverse, because the road behind them was blocked by burning fuel trucks. One drone hit a BTR-82A on its engine deck, disabling it instantly. Another struck the thin top armor of a second BTR, penetrating into the troop compartment. The 3rd hit the command vehicle near the front of the column, killing or wounding the battalion's forward command element. The 6th drone circled back and struck an ammunition supply truck near the rear of the column. The secondary explosion from the ammunition cooking off sent shrapnel across a 200-meter radius, damaging additional vehicles and forcing Russian soldiers to scatter into the tree line. From first impact to last strike, 4 minutes. 14 Russian vehicles were destroyed or rendered inoperable. The pontoon bridge, 2 days of engineering work, collapsed into the Oscill. Fuel fires burned for over 3 hours, producing a smoke column visible from 20 kilometers away, and Russian EW operators still had not detected a single incoming drone. Subscribe to Iron Bullet if you want to understand how modern warfare actually works. The aftermath on the Eastern Bank was chaos. Intercepted Russian radio communications in the minutes following the strike, captured a scene of total confusion. A battalion commander screaming at his EW officer, demanding to know how drones got through the jamming umbrella. The EW officer insisting his system showed no drone activity whatsoever. A logistics officer reporting that 80% of the fuel intended for Western Bank units was burning on the road. A medical officer requesting evacuation for an unknown number of casualties. Later assessed by Ukrainian intelligence at between 25 and 40 killed or wounded. The exchange between the battalion commander and the EW officer was particularly revealing. "How?" the commander demanded. "How did they hit us? You said the sky was clean." "The spectrum is clean," the EW officer replied. "There are no drone signals." There were no drone signals. I don't know what hit us. That confusion, the complete inability to understand what had happened, was perhaps more devastating than the physical destruction. Russian forces in the Kupiansk sector had built their operational planning around the assumption that electronic warfare could neutralize Ukrainian drones. Every crossing, every column movement, every resupply operation for the past 3 months had been conducted under the protection of EW systems. Commanders had accepted increased risk in other areas because they believed the drone threat was managed. In 4 minutes, that assumption evaporated. The strategic consequences rippled outward from the Oscill crossing within hours. Russian forces on the western bank, already low on supplies, received no reinforcement, no fuel, no ammunition, no replacement vehicles. Within 48 hours, Ukrainian forces launched a concentrated assault on 3 Russian positions along the western bank. Lacking the supplies and reinforcements that the Pontoon crossing was supposed to deliver, Russian units withdrew from 2 of the 3 positions. The third held for an additional day before being overrun. By April 1st, 5 days after the drone strike, Ukrainian forces had re-established control over a 7-kilometer stretch of the Oscill's western bank that Russian forces had spent weeks capturing. The fiber-optic drone strike didn't just destroy 14 vehicles, it collapsed an entire sector of the Russian line. If you believe tactics win wars, type "Iron Bullet" in the comments. The technological implications extended far beyond Kupiansk. Russian electronic warfare had been one of Moscow's genuine advantages in the conflict. Systems like the Pol-21 and R-330 ZHGTEL represented billions of rubles in investment and decades of doctrinal development. The Russian military had reorganized entire units around electronic warfare, creating dedicated EW companies and battalions whose sole purpose was to dominate the electromagnetic spectrum over the battlefield. Against conventional drones, these systems worked. Throughout 2025, Russian EW had successfully disrupted thousands of Ukrainian drone operations. GPS jamming caused reconnaissance drones to lose navigation. Radio frequency jamming severed the control links of FPV attack drones. Russian commanders had legitimate reason to believe their EW umbrella was effective. Fiber-optic drones bypassed all of it, not by overpowering Russian jamming, not by finding gaps in the electromagnetic coverage. They simply operated on a different physical medium entirely. Radio waves versus light pulses in glass. It was not an incremental improvement, it was a categorical shift. Ukrainian defense sources confirmed in late March that fiber-optic drone production had been scaling since late 2025, with multiple Ukrainian manufacturers producing variants optimized for different roles. Some models carried anti-armor-shaped charges for strikes against vehicles and fortifications. Others carried thermobaric warheads for soft targets. Still others were configured for reconnaissance, trailing their fiber-optic cables over distances of up to 12 kilometers while transmitting crystal-clear video that no jammer could disrupt. The cost asymmetry was staggering. A single fiber-optic FPV drone cost approximately $700 to $1,000 to produce. The Pol-21 GPS jamming system cost several $1,000,000 per unit. The R-330ZH cost even more. At the Oscill crossing, 6 drones costing roughly $5,000 in total rendered jamming equipment worth tens of millions of dollars completely irrelevant. This was not a one-time event. In the weeks following the Oscill strike, Ukrainian units deployed fiber-optic drones in at least 4 other frontline sectors. Near Bakhmut, along the Zaporizhia line, in the Kherson region, and near Vuhledar, each deployment followed a similar pattern. Russian EW systems active, operators confident in their coverage, and fiber-optic drones passing through the electronic umbrella undetected. What would NATO have done differently at the Oscill crossing? Comment your analysis. Russian military leadership scrambled to respond. Intercepted communications from early April 2026 indicated that Russian commanders had issued emergency directives requiring visual observation posts and acoustic detection stations as supplements to electronic warfare coverage. The measures were crude: soldiers with binoculars and listening devices attempting to spot or hear small drones flying at low altitude, against a fiber-optic drone approaching at night, at treetop level, with its quiet electric motors. These measures offered limited protection. Some Russian analysts proposed more sophisticated countermeasures: directed energy weapons capable of physically destroying drones, regardless of their guidance method, or kinetic intercept systems using shotgun-like patterns to bring down small aircraft. But these systems were either experimental, unavailable in sufficient quantities, or impractical for protecting mobile crossing operations. The fundamental problem for Russia was doctrinal, not just technological. The Russian military had built its near-area denial strategy around electromagnetic dominance. Every tactical plan, every defensive scheme, every offensive operation assumed that controlling the electromagnetic spectrum meant controlling the drone threat. Fiber-optic drones invalidated that assumption entirely, and no quick fix existed. Ukraine, meanwhile, was already iterating. Reports from Ukrainian defense industry sources suggested that next-generation fiber-optic drones under development in early 2026 would feature longer cable ranges, heavier warhead capacity, and swarm coordination capabilities, allowing multiple fiber-optic drones to conduct synchronized attacks on dispersed targets. The technology that destroyed the Oscill crossing was already being described by Ukrainian engineers as a first-generation system. Real tactics, real consequences. Iron bullet. The Oscill River operation also revealed something important about Ukrainian tactical innovation more broadly. Ukraine didn't invent fiber-optic guided munitions. The concept dates back to wire-guided anti-tank missiles from the Cold War era. What Ukraine did was recognize that fiber-optic guidance, updated with modern drone technology and miniaturized components, could neutralize Russia's electronic warfare advantage. It was an adaptation born of necessity, executed with precision, and scaled with remarkable speed. This pattern, identifying an enemy advantage, developing a low-cost countermeasure, and deploying it faster than the enemy can adapt, had defined Ukrainian warfare since 2022. Maritime drones against the Black Sea Fleet, FPV kamikaze drones against armored columns, modified commercial drones dropping munitions into trenches. Each innovation forced Russian forces to react, diverting resources from offensive operations to defensive adaptation. Fiber-optic drones represented the latest iteration of this cycle, and for Russian electronic warfare operators, it was the most devastating. The 6 drone operators who executed the Oscill crossing strike returned to their concealed position without a scratch. 0 casualties. 0 drones lost to enemy fire. 0 equipment damaged. Their total expenditure was 6 drones worth roughly $5,000. They destroyed 14 vehicles worth an estimated $12 to $15 million, collapsed a pontoon bridge that took 2 days to build, and triggered a chain of events that cost Russia 7 kilometers of hard-won territory. That ratio, $5,000 in drones against $15 million in losses, encapsulates why fiber-optic technology sent shockwaves through military analysts worldwide. This was not just a Ukrainian advantage. It was a glimpse of future warfare, where the electromagnetic spectrum is no longer the only battleground for drone operations. So let's answer the question from earlier. How many vehicles did Ukraine destroy at the Oscill crossing? The answer is B, 14. 4 BTR-82. As destroyed directly by drone strikes. 2 fuel trucks detonated with secondary fires engulfing nearby vehicles. 1 ammunition truck with catastrophic secondary explosions. 1 command vehicle struck and destroyed. And 6 additional vehicles, a mix of BTRs and supply trucks, disabled by fire, shrapnel, or the collapse of the bridge approach, rendered inoperable and abandoned as Russian forces retreated from the crossing site. 3 questions remain. Was the Russian decision to stack 14 vehicles at the crossing justified by the EW coverage they had in place? Or should standard dispersal protocols have been maintained regardless? Could Russian forces have detected the fiber-optic drone threat earlier if they had integrated visual and acoustic observation with their electronic warfare systems? And what would you have done differently? As the Ukrainian drone commander, or as the Russian battalion commander relying on an electronic shield that was about to fail? Subscribe to Iron Bullet, because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. The Oscill River is quiet now. The burned-out hulks of BTR-82 as sit half-submerged where the Pontoon bridge used to be. Charred frames of supply trucks line the tree-covered road on the eastern bank. 6 thin fiber-optic cables, barely visible, still trail through the forest canopy. Silent evidence of the weapons that passed through an electronic fortress without a trace. Modern warfare punishes overconfidence without mercy. Stay vigilant.